I'm Csaba Csere, and I'm here with the BMW Alpina B7. The B7 is a large, luxurious four-door sedan that just happens to be god-awful fast. We measured 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds and a top speed of 188 miles per hour. Now, if you're a BMW fan, you've heard the name Alpina, and those figures don't surprise you. But Alpina really isn't that well known in America. It's a German tuning company that specialized in modifying BMWs for 50 years. The company got its start back in the early 60s when BMW introduced the 1500, its first modern car. A guy in Germany named Burkhard Bovensiepen looked at the car, saw it only had a one-barrel carburetor, and he decided to put 2 twin-barrel Webers on there, added 12 horsepower, which was a fair chunk in those days to that car, and Alpina got its start. They have been modifying and racing BMWs for the 50 years since then. Of late, Alpina has started distributing some of its cars through BMW dealerships in America. If this sounds a little bit like AMG and Mercedes, you're not far off, but there's a difference. Mercedes and AMG started collaborating in that way about 20 years ago, and 10 years ago, Mercedes bought AMG, so it's a wholly owned subsidiary. Alpina is still an independent company, and while they work closely with BMW, they still have their own facilities. And those facilities are really vast, so this is no backyard tuning operation. And since Alpina is based in Bavaria, not far from BMW's Munich headquarters, they know that their cars have to perform at high speeds, because when they make a car go faster, a German customer is going to go out to the Autobahn and drive it faster. So the brakes, the tires, the suspension are all upgraded to match the additional horsepower. The strongest characteristic of this car is its performance. You floor the throttle, and the car just downshifts, it rears back, it shoves you into the seat, and it blasts off. And that was 40 to 100 miles an hour right there, and it took no time at all. That's what 540 horsepower does, even in a 5,000-pound car. And I never get tired of flooring the throttle like that. And if you do it at 70 miles an hour, you climb up to 110 or 120, and it just keeps accelerating all the way until it hits 188, which is this car's top speed. But there's a split personality to it, and that is you get that tremendous performance when you mash the throttle to the floor. But now we're driving along at 40 miles an hour, and I ease into the throttle, and we just did a quick downshift, but not much happens. I'm easing into it more and more. And the car, as fast as it is, it doesn't have an effortless feel about it. There are times when it seems like you've got to toe into the throttle a lot more than you'd expect, given how fast this car is. The heart of any Alpina is the modified engine. And under the hood of the B7, we have basically the same 4.4-liter twin-turbocharged V8 that powers a regular BMW 750. Except in this case, the power has gone up from 445 horsepower to 540, and the torque has gone up from 480 foot-pounds to 538. Now, you might think with the turbo engine, any backyard tuner can just crank up the boost and do that. But Alpina hasn't done it the easy way because they want this engine to live. So yes, they've increased the boost, but they've also added larger turbochargers that can efficiently and with low restriction run greater amounts of airflow into the engine. They've also upsized the intercooler so that that greater airflow can be properly cooled and brought down to temperature. Internally, they've put new pistons into the engine that are more durable and can withstand the higher heat developed by the higher horsepower engine. And of course, they've recalibrated the powertrain so that it makes this horsepower but still meets the emission standards in the United States and the rest of the world. In order to make sure the car lives with its elevated power level, Alpina has completely reworked the cooling systems. In the center here, the main radiator pack is larger with a much bigger intercooler to deal with the higher airflow in the engine. And at the bottom here, there's a transmission oil cooler because the transmission's got to work a lot harder when it has 540 horsepower to deal with. These two openings are brake ducts to make the front brakes more effective, and this whole lower spoiler assembly is designed to reduce lift on the front axle. Alpina says it cuts it by 75%. In order to deal with the higher speeds that the higher power can produce, Alpina has completely reworked the B7's running gear. The shocks have been recalibrated, there are new springs which lower the car, and we have a new wheel and tire package. These are 21-inch wheels mounting Michelin Pilot Sport tires front and rear, and this 21-inch wheel is a characteristic Alpina design that they came up with for racing some years ago. It's lighter than conventional wheels, and it's really pretty elaborate. Let me show you a trick aspect, because you notice there's no air valve around the periphery of this rim. If we pull off the Alpina crest in the center and put the key in, we can pull off this cover, and that's where you add the air. And to make this work, of course, this spoke has to be drilled and hollow to communicate with this area here. So this is not an easy thing to do, but it helps make the wheel lighter. It pulls this out of the periphery where it doesn't tend to imbalance the tire as much. And of course, it looks trick because it's nice and hidden behind this cover. One of the easiest ways to distinguish a B7 from a regular 7 Series is this rear spoiler. Now, it's a pretty rear spoiler, but it also cuts the rear lift by 75%. Now, this isn't just some random aftermarket spoiler. This is a device that Alpina designed, developed, and tested in the BMW wind tunnel, so it works. Inside, the B7 is very much like the stock BMW 7 Series, which means it's a very roomy and luxurious cockpit. But there's a few key details that distinguish the Alpina. First are these B7 sill plates. Lets you know it's a B7 the instant you open the door. We have an Alpina instrument cluster, and we have a special Alpina steering wheel. It has its own leather rim. It has this parallel stitching that holds it all together, that makes it easier to glide your hands along the rim. And it has buttons on the back that let you do full manual control of the shifting when you want to. The 7 Series is available in 4 basic configurations: short wheelbase, long wheelbase, rear drive, and all-wheel drive. And the Alpina B7 is also available in all 4 versions. This one happens to be a long wheelbase, all-wheel drive model, or X-Drive as BMW calls it. Now, you might wonder why anyone needs a long wheelbase version of what's already a pretty big car. But it actually has a feature, the luxury seat package, that lets me adjust the rear seat and really recline the rear seat too if I want to. And when I start doing that, I suddenly see a reason for the extra room, because as I recline the seat, the legroom starts going away, and I actually need a little bit more space. So if you really want to be comfortable in the back seat of the car, get this seat package with the long wheelbase version. Another place where the Alpina doesn't feel that fast is just starting off from rest. If I just mash the throttle to the floor, there's actually a fair amount of hesitation before we take off. Some of it is the transmission thinking, some of it is the turbos coming up to boost, and when we're up to boost, we're accelerating really hard. But it just doesn't leap forward as soon as I mash the throttle down. You've got to wait a beat or two before it takes off. One of the most important aspects of any high-performance car is the steering feel. And this generation of 7 Series has not been known for great steering feel, and I would say the B7 is not a tremendous exception. The fact is the steering's very accurate, it's nicely weighted, there just isn't a great sense of feedback. The brakes in this car are very powerful. They look to be the stock calipers, but they're grabbing very, very large rotors, and they've got lots of cooling air going to them. I can't imagine any owners overpowering these brakes easily. Now, one thing you might wonder about when you see those 21-inch tires is, how does this car ride? And the fact is, the ride is firm. It is a high-performance car. It needs a lot of wheel control in order to deal with the speeds it's capable of achieving. But by and large, the shock calibration is very good, and the car doesn't beat you up. But if the pavement is really broken, you're going to notice that 21-inch wheel and tire package. The tires are only 30 and 35 series. They're not very compliant, and on broken pavement, the suspension is going to deliver a rattling feel into the body. Before you buy one of these cars, if you live in a place like the Detroit area, or let's say New Jersey, you owe it to yourself to take a test drive to make sure you can put up with that on the pavement in your area. Good handling has been an Alpina virtue for years, and this car is no exception. It has 0.93 Gs of grip, which is quite a bit for a big car like this, and it's very comfortable in hard corners. But you never lose sight of the fact that this is a pretty big car, and it's not the sort of machine that I feel very comfortable trying to slide and get sideways. In particular, with the all-wheel drive, you're not going to be getting this car very sideways at all, but you can hustle through corners very well. But don't imagine that just because you have X-Drive in this B7, you can drive it through the winter with no other modifications. The Michelin Pilot Sport tires are terrific on dry pavement and good on wet pavement, but they don't work in the cold and they don't work in the snow at all. One of the things I love about this car is that it's supremely comfortable. There's plenty of room, the driving position is excellent, it has a great seat with a million adjustments, and this car has all the creature comforts you can imagine, and it's also very quiet. So if you really want a high-performance car that's just a terrifically comfortable cockpit, it's hard to do much better than this B7. So what do I like about this car? For one thing, it's really powerful. You step on the gas and this thing takes off like a rocket ship. You floor it at 70 miles an hour, and a few seconds later you're at 110 and climbing. It's amazing how quick it is, and I really enjoy that. It's also a beautiful car, and it really catches people's eye. It's hard to say why, because the Alpina modifications are modest. Maybe it's this special blue paint, but people turn around and look at this car when it goes by, and that's a lot of fun. What don't I like about it? Well, despite its performance, it doesn't feel as fast as it is. It's a rocket when your foot's on the floor, but when you just toe into it, it actually is a little sluggish and unresponsive. It's a big car, weighs 5,000 pounds, it's a big sedan, and it doesn't feel like a sports car. Now in the marketplace, it has a number of competitors. We have the Audi S8, we have all the Mercedes AMGs, and now we've got the B7 in that group. It starts under $130,000 for a short wheelbase rear drive version, although with options this car is actually on the high side of $140,000. But still, in that segment, that's not terribly expensive. In fact, it's even cheaper than a stock BMW 760, which is the 12-cylinder, and this car goes quicker than that. So if you care about bargains when you're looking at your $140,000 cars, the B7 is not a bad value. I think the perfect buyer for this car is someone who wants a big, practical sedan that's really fast, but puts a premium on exclusivity. With only 400 or 500 of these cars sold every year, you're just not going to see them on every street corner, not even in Beverly Hills. And for that buyer, the B7's an excellent choice. I'm Csaba Csere. See you next time.